as I travel across the nation covering this beat, the youth vote, I think there's a certain school of thought that, well, if young people are not as invested economically or socially in the capital of this nation, then why is there urgency around this topic of civic engagement of the millennial demographic? And I think that's what we end up coming back to, which is young people are appalled at the American political process right now, but older voters are as well, regardless of how much stake they have financially in this country. Citizenship begins at 18, at least since the 26th Amendment. How do you find yourself in terms of your own persuasion tactics and your own conversations with students on campus? How do you find yourself in conversations with young people who believe the system is so corrupt and so dysfunctional that it would be futile for them to even engage in it? How do you find yourself reacting to it? Because it seems to me that young people are driven by charismatic candidates like Bill Clinton, Barack Obama, but they can only fuel reform, whether it's for Pell Grants and for this 18 to 29 group, they can only fuel reform to such an extent that it seems impossible for really a great overhaul of policy to better the greater portion of society. So how do you react to people who have that impression of American politics? And do you view this campaign as a realization that young people might think post-Obama in terms of their obsession with one candidate as being perhaps the superhero character? And how do you see a campaign that might be undertaken at the grassroots level in which young people create reform and fuel the energy that can really change American politics? So I don't know who might want to grapple with that. Okay, thanks.
So among young people, I noticed two things: disaffection and a sense of disenfranchisement. Disaffection because a lot of young people, and I'm sure that some of you might agree, we feel kind of locked out of the economic structure of the United States at the present time. Because although we're going to school, we keep getting these signals from the media and from friends and from a lot of different other sources that...
And should it be that young people are locked out until they have a degree or until they have a job or until... Because I think that's the fundamental difference between the people who favor civic intervention versus the people who say, okay, well, young people are never going to show up.
No, absolutely not. I think everybody should have a shot.
So continue. You're articulately presenting the case in terms of how you respond to people's comments about dysfunction.
And the second thing was disenfranchisement. Because there's a lot of voter ID laws going on in this electoral cycle, where there's at the grassroots level, there's been a lot of efforts to kind of increase voter registration tightening laws, which are specifically aimed at young people and minorities to kind of discourage their voting behavior. And another thing, I think a potent argument for students, for young people, to get them to vote is politicians don't pay attention to young people because they don't vote. And young people don't vote because politicians don't pay attention to them. It's a vicious cycle. So it takes someone to break the cycle. Politicians are not going to break the cycle on their own because they're entrenched already. They have special interests that they have to cater to. They have, I mean, there's a whole range of constituencies that they have to cater to. So the young people is at the bottom of their priority list because we don't vote in significant enough numbers. But if young people were to begin to raise their percentage in the franchise, elected officials would, by virtue of just wanting to get reelected, would have to pay more attention and give greater importance to the issues that young people face, such as, not having, there being a dearth of jobs and, college tuition getting more expensive by the year.
So you tell some of your friends who might be disinclined to engage that in order to correct the vicious cycle, you have to vote. But do you say anything in particular? Because I think this is important in terms of the discourse of how young people talk to each other about politics.
Yep.
Is there anything more specific that you say, not as a Democrat, and I know that you chair the Young Democrats here on campus, just speaking as a citizen, what are the techniques you use in those conversations to try to not mobilize, but just get young people to be attentive to the fact that they have some stake in what we consider American citizenship.
Well,
so just anecdotally, what do you do?
One of the things is I tell my friends that voting is it's a privilege, it's a right that you have as a citizen of the United States, and it's something that you don't want to give up, because if you don't use your right to vote, over time you begin to lose it, as we are seeing with the tightening of voter registration laws across several states. If you don't use your right to vote, then you get politicians in office who start enacting laws to tighten your ability to vote even further. So you start to lose that ability to vote. And if you start to lose that ability to vote even more, then what happens is, your rights as a citizen begin to diminish because you're treated as sort of a second-class citizen.
I also wanted to add, I think a lot of the disillusionment of the students comes from the fact that a lot of the sources that they're sort of hearing all their information from come from these very polarized media. It's very politicized. There's a lot of rhetoric that they sort of spill around, and I think that the whole division of like this congressional infighting, bureaucracies, or this very divisive political sphere, I think is what causes students to be more inactive. And I think that one of the resolutions to that, so if I were personally talking to someone, I would refer them to more independent or alternative sources of media, so that they can make decisions for their own, as opposed to hearing very divided or very politicized notions about what's going on.
What about you folks in terms of responses to disengaged young people?
Sure. Truthfully, I think the problem lies with us, we the people of the United States, our generation, and the thing is that we're arrogant, we're ignorant, and we're very stubborn about a lot of things. And that costs us every year. The thing is, we're part of the ATM generation. This is something that my parents used to call it. We're the generation that takes shortcuts to every end, and that is our problem. We expect more from our leaders than ourselves, and that is the biggest problem. We should hold ourselves to the same standards, if not higher, than every other person, so we can do better, so we can make a real change instead of what we think is a change. And exactly by what you all said, exactly by what you all said before, to everyone else who doesn't vote or says they're too busy to vote or they're not inclined to vote. Voting is a right if you're a citizen, but citizenship, is that a right or a privilege? If you're born here, it's a right, you have it. But if you're not from this country, it's a privilege. And if you look at everyone who isn't a born citizen, everyone who comes here, goes through the green card process and finally becomes a citizen, they're amazed at how many people fail to realize how lucky they are to be natural citizens here and the rights they have. The truth is, people who aren't natural citizens are very much so excited by everything, and they're so involved because they see it as a privilege. Even after they become a citizen, they still see it as a privilege, that they have to do their part, and that is what our generation needs to learn. And hopefully that is something that we will learn.
If I could just add one thing, and I wonder if you agree with your friend, our friend.
We're saying that now.
No, it's true. I wonder too if the second or first generation families and voters who take their responsibilities more seriously, if that might provide a natural resurgence of civic energy, or if you might disagree. I just wonder, because that's a very interesting point you made.
My parents were both immigrants, and when they became citizens, they did every sort of civic duty learned in government in high school. Literally, they saw their citizenship as something they had earned, but if they didn't use it correctly, someone might take it away. So when I was growing up, it was every debate, every presidential debate. I have watched every presidential debate, and it's instilled in me now. I can't go without watching a presidential debate anymore. Every election, including the municipal and special elections, my parents were out there voting. And I think that's because they had to go through the process. I'm not sure if I can make a generalization that everyone is like that, but it's harder growing up in a family that's directly influenced by political decisions. My family's working class. My family was very strongly identifiable as Muslim in a post 9/11 era. So there was the thought that if we didn't use our rights, something might happen, or we might not. We want to be as American as possible. We want to use all these rights that are guaranteed to us. And that thought has been passed down to me and my sisters.
I think there's a lot of anecdotal evidence to that effect, and I wonder what may result more journalistically or scientifically in terms of the academic research to support that idea that our democracy may be enriched as a result of that kind of intelligent and caring approach to being really a caretaker of our democracy, as well as responsible for our own behavior as citizens or employees.